Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Push Through podcast. I'm your host, Keisha Reeves. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a group practice here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I specialize in women as well as maternal mental health. Here on the podcast, we'll talk about womanhood, motherhood, and a little bit of everything in between. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a quick chat with me.
And don't they let me when I falter. Winters embrace. Too much on my plate.
All right, guys, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Push Through podcast. And I am so happy to introduce my next guest, which is Lisa Baker. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Now, before we hop into motherhood, I know that you have a pretty cool background. I'm from Georgia, from the South. I've always been in Georgia. I've never moved and lived anywhere else, but you've lived in the UK. You've traveled a lot and just have a really cool, interesting childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I definitely don't have a normal childhood compared to my peers and friends. I was born and raised in London, England, and then moved to the States as a teenager when I was just shy of 18 when my family decided to move here. So what made my childhood unique is I have a dad who was a celebrity, who was a singer, a professional artist, and in the group Heatwave from the 70s and 80s. And so that made my childhood unique because we traveled as a family a lot. My dad was obviously full-time musician and singer, but my mum and him traveled together a lot, which meant we also did until we were in school age. And we probably didn't have as structured a kid lifestyle as other kids did because my mum was always home. My dad was singer all over the place. So I had a very fun childhood, a very well-traveled childhood, but probably a little unconventional in some areas. Lots of babysitters. Shaka Khan watched us once.
Oh my God, you never told me that. That's pretty cool.
My parents were friends.
Oh, wow.
So random stuff like that, you hang out with, the Ohio players or whoever. I don't know,
nice.
That it was normal for me growing up to be around those musicians. I didn't know who they were at the time. I was a kid. But then growing up as a teenager and a young adult, it just allowed me to have a lot of great experiences that I'm really grateful for. My parents were amazing. My dad passed away just a few years ago, but they were just an incredible couple, an incredible example. And I had a fun childhood, but it was all over the place.
Now, you know how some girls growing up, they've kind of had this idea of being very maternal and when they have a child and they have these baby dolls, and some don't. Some women just never really think about motherhood and kind of stumbled into it. What was it like for you? Was it something that you always knew that you wanted, or was it something that kind of came later for you?
No, it was definitely something I always knew I wanted. I have a big family. I'm the oldest of 4, but both my parents have a ton of siblings. My mum is one of 8. My dad is one of 5. I have tons of cousins. So family, big families, lots of kids. That was always what I was surrounded by. So I don't know that I gave it deep thought, but I think there was always a subconscious expectation. One day I'm going to be a mum. I don't know what that looks like. I wasn't one of those super planned people who were like, I want to be married at this age and I want to have kids at this age.
Which is good.
That wasn't like how I thought about it, but it was more like, you know what, this is the trajectory of your life. You're going to be a mum one day, you're going to be married, and how that happens or what that looks like, we'll see. But yeah, I definitely always saw myself being a mum at some stage in some, however this looked, whether it was adopted kids, my kids, how many kids, it was up in the air.
Okay. Well, who were the maternal influences for you growing up?
I mean, obviously my mum, big time, but she had a lot of mum friends and my grandparents, my nan on my mum's side and my grandma on my dad's side, they all parented very differently. I will say, my dad's upbringing, he's from Dayton, Ohio. My mum's from Liverpool, England. they had drastically different upbringings. My dad was like old school, my grandma, get a switch from outside, I'm gonna beat you with it. You know, she was also a woman who started at 17, married with kids, and had 5 boys before she was even 25.
Wow.
And so her outlook, her disciplinarian style was starkly different. She had 5 boys, men to raise, you know, with my grandfather. And so she was very militant. I say borderline abusive these days. Like, when she talks about them in their childhood, I'm like, Grandma, like, you can't, you know. But she loved her boys, and it was just, you know, I think especially back then, right, we're talking in the 50s, 60s, 70s, trying to make sure that you raise 5 black men to, you know, great in life. I'm sure that was not easy. So her style was more militant, less nurturing, whereas on my mum's side, with 8 siblings, and there's 7 girls and 1 boy.
Wow.
And the boy is number 2, so she's got 1 older sister and 6 younger sisters. And they were much more calm, loving, nurturing. No one was spanked ever. You know, the cat would babysit. Like, my mum would tell stories that they'd all be lined up on the couch, and the cat would swipe their feet if they tried to get down, and my nan would run to the shop and come back, and they'd all still be sitting on the couch because they were afraid of the cat. Like, just very different, you know, just very different styles. And so as a result, my parents were also different. They were very much on the same page with all 4 of us, but their styles were different. My dad was quick to be like, you need a whooping, and my mum that would not be her first response. But it's because of how they were raised. So yeah, my mum was a great influence, my grandparents, and then my mum had some great friends that were amazing mothers too, that I got to look up to. And then as I got older, I had friends that became mothers way before me. That I could look to and really admire their style. And I think we can both agree, like, parenting has changed so much from when we were kids to how it is now. It's even my mom, you know, and other people probably like 50 plus, 60 plus will be like, this was never around when I was raising kids. This was, you know, so we have a really different experience there too. So I kind of pull from, you know, family influence. And then also my friends who over the last 10, 20 years have been having kids prior to me.
Yeah, that's true. And like, to your point, like a couple of episodes ago, we had a writer on the show named Ara. She wrote this book called Of Mothers and Daughters. And she was writing about her mother's experience of how she was as a mom, and how similar to your paternal grandmother, how she was very militant. And in thinking about it and talking about it, it was like in older generations of mothers, they didn't have self-care. They didn't meditate. They didn't go out in the garden and have this time alone. And they oftentimes, they didn't have like spouses that would really like co-parent with them to give them breaks. And now motherhood looks different for us. Like, we require differently. We take care of ourselves. We put ourselves first so that we can show up and be well-grounded moms to our children. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very big difference. I mean, life for women over the past 50 years has changed, right? Just the female experience on the planet, especially in the US and the UK, Western culture, is so different to 40 years ago even, you know? So I think that has altered how we parent, how we mother, and how we marry, how everything. So that's, I think, been really cool. Like, even now as a mum with my mum, she's still my biggest resource. She's still who I lean on. She's still who I go to. She keeps my son during the day while I work. And yet still there's fresh conversation, because I'm learning things that she didn't know, you know, and saying, oh, well, I read this. Or someone talked to me about this, and she'll be like, well, I didn't do that when you were a kid. We did this. And, you know, and having those kind of fresh perspective conversations with her now, because life is different. My mum didn't work when she had little ones at home. She only worked when everyone was in school, everyone. So as long as there was an infant in the house or a child not of school age, my mum didn't go to work. So now, you know, I'm a working mum.
And so, there's
Right.
that dynamic's different. I read at a very early age because my mum was home.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so there's, and I want that for my kids, but it's like, wow, how do you give that same energy that she had the liberty to do back then that I don't necessarily have the liberty to do now?
Yeah.
And learning those kind of nuances and trying to adapt it to 2021 parenting.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's so many differences, but yeah.
Yes. Now to start about your motherhood journey, I know that you had Hudson and now you're pregnant with Willow. And they'll be like fairly close in age, which is super cool. In evolution or time has changed for sure. Like years ago, women were getting pregnant 18. My mom had her first child at 18.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like people got married at 23, had children immediately after. And now oftentimes people are just like waiting, especially women with careers and jobs. I didn't get pregnant with my first until 31, 32. And then I got pregnant with my second at 35, I think. Yeah, 35. How was it for you waiting later to get pregnant? And was that a difficult decision, an excited decision, or what was that experience like for you?
I was definitely one of those people who just assumed, because of how life goes, that I would be married and have kids sometime in my late 20s. That was just like the arbitrary, that's probably when it happens, because back when I was 17, 18, that was generally the trajectory. People finished college and then they got married, like you said,
Yeah.
had kids, somewhere in that mid to late 20s. I was in no state of mind to do that in my 20s. Like, I'm so glad God spared me from those kind of decisions. I was very young. I wasn't like a 19-year-old going on 35. I was 19, then I was 20, and I was 21. Like, very much in those ages emotionally, which I appreciate, because that was the time to be that. So as I got into my 30s, that's probably the first time I started to really consider my age. In my 20s, didn't care. Like, I wasn't even looking for that. I didn't feel like I was mature enough for that stage in life. Once I got to be about 32, 33, and I didn't have, 32, 33, was I dating? I think I was, but I wasn't married. And that was important for me to be married first. So it was never even an option in my mind that I would be a mother prior to being a wife. So that's when I started to think about, like, I should probably start like really seriously thinking about who I want to marry and being in relationships like that. And then that kept getting pushed. And then I was single for most of the beginning of my 30s, and I met my husband at 36. We didn't get married for 4 more years. So, 4 more years. So that was, my focus is more on the relationship, but in the back of my mind was definitely that tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
But I felt great. I didn't feel old. I wasn't ailing in any way. I didn't feel like I was, I never felt the biological pressure, like I'm not going to be able to conceive. My periods were very regular, all of this stuff. So I and I feel like that's a whole nother topic, fertility and women in the 20th century, because I have friends in their 20s who couldn't conceive. So I don't even think it's an age thing anymore, personally. I think it's totally environmental, another topic for another day. But I felt fine. So I wasn't fearful of the act of conceiving, but I was concerned with, what does my life look like as I get older? Do I want to still be carrying children at a later age? Whether I can or not was irrelevant. Do I want that? So met my husband at 36. We married when I was 40, and we were immediately pregnant about 3 months later with Hudson. So right now we're getting ready to celebrate our 2-year anniversary, and we're 1.5 kids in. And this will be the end. And mostly because, so that's what I would say was the biggest change. It affected how many kids I had. I had met Ray at 30 and married at 34, 33, or however long that process took. I probably would want 3. And pregnancy has been super easy for me. It has not been that challenging. I would probably go for 3. But at 42, baby number 2, it's out of the question. Not because I can't, but because I just don't want to.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be still nursing and doing the newborn stuff at 45. So I don't question anyone else who wants to do that, because I don't think there should be an age limit on it for you. But for me, that's what I reevaluated. That's what I was like, oh, well, where do I want to be? So I think 2 kids is great. We're very blessed, very lucky that we were able to conceive with no issues. And pregnancy's been very easy. And the biggest, I'm a geriatric mother.
I hate that name, but they're rebranding it. Now they're calling it 35 plus. They're getting rid of geriatric moms now, because that just does not sound appealing.
Like insulting.
It is.
Geriatric. Why do I have to be a geriatric mom? But that label's there, right? Like you're a high risk pregnancy because you're a later term mother. And what I learned that was very interesting, when I fell pregnant with Hudson at 40, another friend of mine who also had kids later informed me that her doctor told her that a lot of the studies around fertility after 35 or after 30, which kind of came to this conclusion of this geriatric mother, were based on Caucasian women. No shade.
Well, most statistics in maternity are based off of Caucasian women. There isn't a lot of data that's on Black mothers.
No, and her doctor explained to her that this data was highly driven by Caucasian women whose fertility did statistically diminish after 35. However, they found that ethnic women, not just Black, Asian women, Indian women, their fertility did not fall off the charts that quickly at 35. They were able to very healthily conceive later into life. But because of the world we live in, they don't want to single out our Caucasian sisters and say, you guys are geriatric at 35 and these women are geriatric at 45. They don't want to do, so it's just everyone's geriatric. But that's not necessarily true. And my pregnancies haven't been any more easy or difficult than my friends 10, 20 years younger than me. So I don't subscribe to that. So I think as long as you feel healthy and your reproductive system is working fine, do you know, and I don't, it's kind of, now it's to the point where other people bring it to my attention. Oh my gosh, you're 42 and you're pregnant, like, wow, how is that? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I am 42 and I'm pregnant, but I don't feel like I'm in this extra space. Experiencing things any different.
Well, I love how you're saying that, because it's like you are grounding yourself in the facts of what your body is telling you, versus taking on what society may think or what other people may put on you. Because in the work that I do, I work with several women, and ones that are waiting to get married and they're over 35, there's this panic and this anxiety of, will this happen for me? Am I at risk of having miscarriages, or am I at risk of not being able to conceive? How many eggs do I still have left to, work with? And I get that, you are mindful, but at the same time, also just being in tune with what biologically do you know about your body, and what has your body told you, and what are your medical records, and what's your medical history, to give you any type of indication that something may be wrong. And I like how you didn't focus so much on what the stats they were putting out there, but more so on just you and the type of mom you want it to be, and what you want to carry at this particular age.
Absolutely. And I mean, like I said, I have friends 10, 20 years my junior that have more challenges conceiving than me. And I had to look at that holistically. It is a very individual journey. There can be stats galore. It doesn't matter. We're all individuals. And I could be somebody who just, genetically was designed to have trouble conceiving. That would have nothing to do with my age. I could be 17, 25, 45, and these issues would have existed. Or it can be someone that, you see them, look at the Duggars, like people who just be having 21 kids. Like, why? What is going on? She's genetically predisposed to that. Like I really believe, like for whatever reason, that pregnancy, multiple pregnancies, it comes to her because that's her individual body, and not everybody would even be able to have that many kids. Some people's body would naturally just say no. After like 4 or 5, they'd be like, oh, it's not sticking anymore. So yeah, I had to look at it. How do I feel? What do I want? You know, what does this look like for me and Ray's future? What is our planning? And age was just not even considered until I thought about how many.
Right.
That was the only time that I was like, yeah, I kind of wanted it. There's a point in life when I want to be able to go on the cruise with my husband and not, we're still like a 1-year-old at home. You know, I kind of want to get past that stage, and you know, and we want to have our roaring, well, I'll be 50, he's younger than me, but when I'm in my 50s, I want to be living my best life with my kids that are all the way school age.
Yes.
I mean, Janet Jackson, more power to her. She's 50, she had a baby, you know, good for her. That's not that. And I don't judge it. I think that's great. She had an amazing career, right? She did what she wanted to do, and had her baby when she wanted to have it. And I don't see anything wrong with that. As long as she feels like she's fit and ready to run after a toddler, good for her. I want to be done with that part.
Now, to talk a little bit about what labor and delivery looked like for you with Hudson, I know parts of the story, but I don't think I know or remember. I know that you had a C-section, but I can't remember if it was planned or not. But I remember you sharing about just the difficulties with the recovery afterwards and just like how hard that was. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My C-section was 110% not planned. Like it was anti-planned, actually. Like that was the opposite of the plan in every way. I did not want a C-section. Me and my doctor had talked about how that was a very last resort. I'm not a fool. I want my baby to get out and be healthy. So if a C-section it is, a C-section it is. But I wanted to exhaust every option. I really wanted to deliver vaginally, just because I knew that the recovery was very different from, from what I was told by all my friends and family. That being said, there was a caveat that I had that kind of, not want to say ruined, but like threw a wrench in that plan. I also did not want to be induced. And the reason I didn't want to be induced was because your chances of a C-section once you're induced go up like 40%. And I had like 4 friends who had babies within the year that I had Hudson, and all of them who were induced had C-sections. So this was in my mind, and I was like, I do not want to be induced. I do not want to be induced. And I knew that the whole just process was just going to be rough. Well, I was induced. So like my plan out the window. You need to be able to roll with that, I will say. But I ran out of amniotic fluid at 38 weeks. So I went in for a regular scheduled checkup, you know, doing the little heart thing, and then she comes, does ultrasound, and the doctor's like looking at me, and she looks at the screen, and she's like, and I'm like, and she's like, well, we're having a baby today. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, we're going to have a baby today. And I said, yeah, but what do you mean? And she was like, today we're delivering your baby. And I said, I am hearing you. Like, I hear the words you're saying, but how? Because I'm not in labor. Right. And she said, yeah, but you're going to be, because this baby doesn't have any more amniotic fluid. So he has to come out. I'm going to go call the hospital, and you can go home, take a bath, and I'll meet you down there. And I'm
now, does that mean that your water broke, or was there just a leak in the back, or he had outgrown, or what did that mean?
That apparently, as it was explained to me, your uterus has, or your placenta, it has a lifespan. And it ended. Like the amniotic fluid was over, so there was no water to break. He was just in there like so she's like, yeah, I got to look for these pockets of liquid and you have none, so go home, have a good meal, take a bath, and I'll give you a call when you can come back to the hospital, meet me at the hospital. So I'm like calling Ray, like, apparently we're having a baby. So I said to her, I said, well, what I mean is like, how? And she goes, oh, well, we're going to induce you. And I looked at her and she knew I didn't want to be induced. So we went, it was a Friday at 11 p.m. is when we finally got the call to go in. And they gave me a little pill and, started the things, my contractions. And I was 1 centimeter dilated at that doctor's appointment. So I wasn't dilated. They start the process. I was kind of rolling with it. The contractions were tough, but I also suffered with dysmenorrhea growing up. So I had like really intense periods. So, not to say that contractions aren't horrible. They are, but I could take it. It was all right. And so they're coming, then they did like some other thing. They're shoving stuff up there. I mean, they're trying everything. So at this point, they decide they've got to actually put fluid up because there isn't any.
Oh, wow.
They go to break the bag, and then she's like, I can feel the baby's head. So they start putting fluid in, and it's like going in and coming out at the same time. It was just a lot going on. And fast forward, Sunday, we still haven't had a baby. I have not dilated past 5 centimeters. They've started Pitocin, and all the things I knew was going to happen because my body really wasn't ready to go into labor. And so this induction was not really making Hudson want to come out, So sure enough, at 8 o'clock, the doctor came in the room on Sunday night and said, we've tried everything. They'd done the balloon. They did all the things. We're going to have to do a C-section. It's too long. He has to come out. So I swallowed that. We did the C-section. It wasn't as bad as I thought. It was a strange experience. I don't know if did you have any C-sections? You had all vaginally?
All vaginal, yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird laying on that operating table and you're like in a legit OR, but you're wide awake and they're like cutting you open from the middle. It was very weird. I couldn't let my brain associate because it was too... I had to like break away and just not even imagine what they were doing behind the screen because the thought of my insides being open and I'm just here like, hey, like having conversations with people.
Was Ray able to see? So he like watched it, or did he just stay on your side?
Stayed on my side.
Okay.
He didn't want to see. He said when they took the baby out and then they like went with him to the other side of the room, he kind of like caught a glimpse of the horribleness and like quickly turned away, but like they take everything out. It's gross. So but I had a friend who's a nurse at the hospital and she was there in the room with me. So after she was great. She wasn't even working. She came in on her day off just to be in the OR with us. And so when Ray went with the baby, she came and sat and held my hand while they stitched me up and kind of like talked me through it and was like, oh, it looks really good. It's going to be a really small scar. And I was like, thank you. So that was that experience. And then being in the hospital, it was, you just had major abdominal surgery. It was a little sore. It was when I got home and I swelled up like a puffer fish. The amount of fluid my body retained, my legs were like twice the size. I mean, it was horrendous. It was just so much swelling. And they were like, yeah, that's normal. You're going to be swollen. The water's, you've had a lot of fluids and it's got to go somewhere and it will go away. Well, it took like 4 weeks.
Wow. And
during that time, you have a newborn and most of the reason I had such extensive swelling was because for 2.5 days they were pumping fluid into my vagina, and in through. It was just like an overkill of fluids that I was getting, and so that swelling was a little bit, I think, more intense than a standard C-section. Yeah. All because of that induction, which is why, in hindsight, I would have just been like, well, let's just do a C-section today, just skip all of that. So your insides are swollen, your organs are trying to settle back into the place that they go. So my bladder would be obstructed. I wouldn't be able to tell if it was full. And it was really rough. I mean, it was definitely a bonding time for my husband and I because you're just so vulnerable. There was like I couldn't do for myself things, but we got through it. And, in about 4 weeks, I was up and I was fine. Probably after about a week or two, I was walking around. I was just still experiencing a lot of swelling in my feet and lower legs. And that was really frustrating, just being that swollen. And that was the worst of it. And then it was like, once the swelling went, I was feeling great. By the time I went to my 6-week checkup, I felt much more like myself.
Right.
The swelling had gone down. I was feeling like a woman again. But this time around, we're doing a scheduled C-section.
I was going to ask you that, if you were going to do a VBAC or a scheduled one. Okay.
It was so traumatic to me.
Yeah, just not have to go through that again.
Yeah, my doctor, she offered, she said, the way that they did your C-section, you are able to deliver vaginally if you would like to. And I said, I would not like to.
It's like, as a matter of fact, no.
Yeah, I would not like to. Can we just go ahead and she said, absolutely, that would have been my suggestion. Just because we don't know if you're going to have the same experience. You may run out of amniotic fluid at 38 weeks again. That might just be the length of time that you carry, which is perfectly safe. He was completely healthy and fine. So
yeah,
we'll be scheduling that.
Now, let me ask you this, because in some of the work that I do with some women who have the plan alters, and it becomes something just completely different, and it can be traumatic, which, with trauma, it varies for different people. What's traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you, and vice versa. But some people have a hard time coming to terms with things not going as planned. How were you able to talk yourself into it, being that, like, from day one, you didn't want to be induced, and secondly, you did not want a C-section, and both things happen? Like, how did you walk yourself into it? And I know, like, of course, like, we all just want mom and baby to just be alive. That's the ultimate goal. But still, the story that you wanted was different. How did you come to terms with that?
I think you have to come to terms with that prior to it starting. I knew that this was the preferred way, but I was totally open to the reality that it might not go that way. And that started the day I left the doctor's office at 38 weeks being told, you're having a baby today. We're already off plan, right? Like, we've already diverted because baby's coming sooner than expected. So I think those expectations, that calmness has to happen prior to. If you're pregnant, it's fine to have a plan, it's fine to have preferences, but list them in your mind as preferences, not plans. Like, this is the preference. I would prefer to go in, deliver vaginally. I was hoping I wouldn't even need an epidural because I wanted to feel everything. I wanted to be able to be in the position that I wanted to be in. I didn't want to be, like, on my back. That was in my mind what a beautiful birthing experience would be. But I understood that that's not life. Life is full of uncertainties, and especially when it comes to our medical care, if you're not able to switch and roll with the punches, you're kind of setting yourself up for anxiety. I was not happy when she came to tell me, we've tried everything, you're not dilating, we're going to go ahead and do a C-section, but I was not panicking. I was like, okay, you know what, we knew that this was a possibility.
Right.
It wasn't like she came in and said, we've decided we're going to deliver the baby through your nostrils. Are you ready? We're going to push the baby out through your nose. Like, she didn't say something that, like, I couldn't have possibly fathomed or prepared for. She told me something that was a truth that I knew was always on the table, just because that's how it goes. The baby's coming out one of two ways. So I think if you keep that in mind, I want to have, I have friends that say, I want to have my baby at home. Okay, but what if that doesn't work out?
Right.
What if you have a medical emergency and you have to go to the hospital? Is it going to negate the experience? Is it going to make this baby's coming into the world like totally tainted now? I have a friend who wants to have another baby just because she didn't like the way her birthing story was, that, and I'm like, but your baby's here and healthy and happy, and your story is your story.
Yeah.
Would I love to have been having this conversation with you, talking about how all the methods of breathing techniques that I got through my contractions, and I pushed that baby out, and that would be a great story, but that's just not the reality. It was different. And that's still my story with my child, of how I brought you into this world. And I think we get caught up in is C-section the easy way out, or is C-section more challenging? There's all these preconceived notions versus C-section versus vaginally. Are you a stronger woman if you didn't get an epidural versus if you got an epidural?
Right.
Put all of that, like,
yeah.
We're bringing babies into the world.
Yeah.
I don't care if it came out your armpit. Like, you carried it and then the baby came out, So for me, it was the expectation level. Like, I had a preference, but I knew I just had to keep in the back of my mind. And my mom, even when I was there, I think the Saturday, she was like, you do know you're probably going to have C-section, right? And I'm like, no, we're here trying. And my mum was like, I know, but just go ahead and keep it in the back of your mind because it's been 24 hours.
Right.
So I think that would be my biggest advice to anyone going into the birthing process with a quote unquote plan. Make your plan flexible to reality, so that for your own sanity, if no one else's, just for your own. Like, this is how I want it to be, but I completely am surrendered to the fact that it just might be a different story.
Right. My last question is, I remembered you had described, and forgive me if I'm not remembering adequately. I'm paraphrasing what I do remember, but I remember you telling me that there was a point where after you had Hudson and you were recovering from the C-section and you were trying to get to the bathroom because your bladder was full and you could not even like get there, and you just kind of like sat on the floor and wept. And you were just so grateful for your husband because he just was like such a huge support to you during this time. What advice would you give to a woman that's recovering and her body is just having a really hard time, and she's trying to, bond with this baby and become the mom that she wanted to, but also recognizing the physical restrictions that she has and not being able to just like move the way that she wants to move and needing to depend on this other person to kind of do everything? What would you kind of say to like help her know that there's like a light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, yeah. For one, that was definitely the worst night of the entire recovery. I just woke up with like this overwhelming urge to pee. And when I got out of bed, I couldn't walk. Like, that's how badly I needed to pee, that each step was shooting like immense pain. So I made it to the end of the bed and I'm sobbing. I'm sobbing because I'm trying to figure out, is it quicker to get to my master bedroom toilet or to the toilet that's in one of the other bedrooms out the door because of the space? And Ray is asleep. So he happened to wake up and I'm at the edge of the bed just weeping because I know that I can't make it. And he just goes and gets a trash can.
Oh.
And he brings it, and I'm using the trash can to shuffle my feet like a walker. And Ray's like, Lisa, just go. And I'm like, no, that's disgusting. And I'm just like bawling my eyes out. And he leaves the room. I don't know what he went to do, but I realized in that moment, I'm going to have to go in the trash can. Like, I'm not making it. And so by the time he came back, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I went. I was mortified. He's like, he's my husband, but like, we don't even married less than a year. And I was just mortified. Like, I was just everything. Like, I was so upset with myself, with everything. It was just overwhelming. And I remember he said, it's okay, Lisa, it's fine. And he was just so calm. He took that disgusting trash can and he like took it away, and I went and got in the shower, and then he was like, and I was like, I'm so embarrassed. And he was like, this is what marriage is.
Oh.
He was like, it's fine, babe. Like, you just had a baby. And I'm like, oh my God. But it taught me so much in that moment about surrender and about vulnerability. And it taught me a lot about my marriage, really. Ultimately, I gained a lot of respect for him in that moment because he didn't make me feel any worse than I was already feeling. Instead, he just kind of reassured that this is just part of the process. I'm here for you.
Oh.
I'm not going to make a big deal. He never spoke about it again. Like, just let it go. And I'm like, oh. But you know, it was a period of time. That what I took from all of that healing, all of that the situation of the bloating, all of the swelling, it was a period in time. It had a beginning and it had an end. By time, like I said, by the time I reached my 6-week appointment to check up on the scar and see my OB, that seemed like many moons ago. And it had just been maybe 3 weeks earlier. So, you know, and now it's a distant memory, you know, so it's a period of time, and just know that your body has to do what it has to do to heal. You have to be gentle with yourself, patient with yourself. People, whether it's a spouse or a friend or a family member that wants to step in and help you, even in those embarrassing moments where you've got your big panties on, or, you know, whatever's going on. If somebody's willing to be there in that moment of vulnerability and take on the gross, the embarrassing, and not make a big deal out of it, that is a blessing. Take that help. Don't be proud. Don't be proud, because your baby needs you to heal. And didn't need me to try to like push through the pain and you know, like I wasn't alone. And I think that's something that we take for granted sometimes when we do have a family member or a spouse that's willing to help, because not everybody has that. So I would say for anyone struggling with that or thinking about that recovery time, be gentle with yourself. It's okay. Like I was trying to do too much too soon, if I'm completely honest. You know, the doctor said, don't go up and down the stairs. I was going up and down the stairs, you know, so it's like, I learned that it's okay to be patient and gentle with yourself. Allow people to help you. You are vulnerable, whether you like it or not. Your condition has made you vulnerable. You need it, you know, so that would be my biggest advice. That's what I learned anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Like, this was a very valuable conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been really fun. I really appreciate you even wanting my input.
Oh, yes. Thanks for chatting with us for another episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, September 18th is our Push Through Mama Summit from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're talking about reclaiming your freedom as a mother, self-image, combating anxiety, and we have a phenomenal keynote speaker. So if you haven't already, go get your tickets before we sell out over at pushthroughmom.com. If you aren't already following us on Instagram, we're at pushthroughmom, and share this episode, rate, review, send it to all your friends. All right, guys, until next time, keep pushing.